Good afternoon for any of you early joiners. We're going to start in about a minute, so just bear with us as you join the call. Well, it's the top of the hour, so why don't we start with the introductions first, and then as people join us, as I see they're joining, we can get into the substance of the program. So I'll just start quickly by introducing our guests today. Excuse me one second here. And they are Gary Rhoads, who is CEO of Xvoyant. He's the EEA academic advisor. He's a leading engagement entrepreneur and professor emeritus of marketing and entrepreneurship at Marriott Graduate School of Business, which is at Brigham Young University. We're also going to be joined today, or are joined today, with Todd Hanson. He's executive advisor to the EEA, that's the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, and he's president of Catalyst Performance Group, which is an ROI of engagement and business operating system provider, and we'll be learning a little bit more about that from him shortly. So I'd like first to start, Gary, with you, and talk a little bit about how you think COVID and what's happening is going to affect the whole issue of engagement, of people management in the coming year and years.
Sure. Let me first say grateful to be here, and thanks for all those that are joining us right now. I mean, I am getting lots of questions by CEOs and leaders throughout the world in 52 countries. And they're all asking the same question: what's it going to be like when this pandemic ends? And are we going to go back to what we used to go back to? And I really say we're heading into really new normals. And the real question is, what do we do first? And every time as I look around, it's number one, safeguard your culture and your people. I mean, think of the employees that you have right now. What do they want? They want security. And they want safety. And that's probably the number one issue before you look at anything else: safeguard your culture. Because whatever you used to do in your culture, meeting and the meetings and the interactions and the communications and the promotions and everything you did with with all the stakeholders in your organization has now changed. And we're now, just like now, we're getting used to using video conferencing, et cetera. And we got to learn on how do you engage people in that kind of environment. And so safeguard your culture. How do you celebrate now? How do you communicate now in a way that reinforces the values and engages all your stakeholders in your enterprise? And that's really, I think, the first step. And then I think more than ever, we're going to learn why it's important and create engagement, because now engagement coming to the forefront. Because we're going to really find out that when you engage, companies that engage their stakeholders, their employees, their customers, their suppliers, they're going to see a real return on investment. We're going to be talking about that today. And so that's kind of my first step is get ready. And it's going to require new mechanics, new ways that we celebrate, new ways that we communicate in a way to maintain those values that we spent years developing in the enterprise.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. And again, Gary and Todd, feel free to interject if I'm missing something at a key point. Also, folks, you can ask questions. And Todd, I'm going to ask you to monitor that. So I'm just getting a question already. Yes, folks, we will be sending out the deck. So in any case, I'm going to get right into it. And folks, I'm warning you, you're going to get it in a New York minute. Todd here challenged me. I get a case of apples from his beautiful orchard in northern Wisconsin if I can do this right on time. So I'm going to be covering what it is. What is this human capital management metrics model, return on investment measurement, and I'll quickly talk about stakeholder capitalism because you're going to be hearing a lot more about it. There are many books coming about it, etc. Then I'm going to talk about why now quickly. And then I'm going to get into the human capital metrics. But before that, I'm going to get into what really is most important. None of these metrics matter unless we have a plan to make them useful to our organizations. And everybody leaves that out. And I think that's the most important thing. And Gary or Todd will have an opportunity to talk about that in our webinar. And then we will get into talking about the human capital reporting and metrics, because they're very useful guides to coming up with a scorecard that any organization can benefit from to improve its performance. You remember, we spend 50% or more of our money on our employees in all the different things that we do, and yet the levels of measurement that we have and metrics for them, for their management, are very poor compared to other business operations. Then I'm going to get more into the master measurement model, which is a very granular tool developed by the American Productivity and Quality Center for the Incentive Research Foundation, which has never been used, probably, or pardon me, it has been used by one company, which has developed a software product to power it. And I'll mention them perhaps later if I have time. And then the ROI of engagement process, Todd's going to cover that. He's been an expert on this probably since the turn of this century. And then we'll finally mention it for those of you who are interested, how you can roll up your sleeves and bring ROI-based solutions to your companies or your clients. So Todd, again, if you can manage those questions and let us know. I've already done the introductions. So I'm going to get real fast, folks. I'm watching the time. So sit down and get ready. So first off, again, do be clear, what is human capital management? It's a formal process that helps organizations sustainably achieve their financial goals by fostering the engagement of the entire enterprise, all of their people, and not just employees. That's one of the big misnomers. It's everybody. Then every business can benefit from a formal enterprise engagement plan or operate, and even more importantly, a business operating system that simply provides a systematic approach to addressing the needs of all stakeholders in a systematic way, as opposed to reactive and ad hoc. And stakeholder capitalism, that's a term for this new form of capitalism embraced by leading, really the in crowd, if you will, of worldwide capitalism, based on achieving shareholder returns by addressing the needs of all stakeholders in a systematic way. And indeed, when you look at the people that are really on top of this, it's a who's who. Besides ISO, you've got the Business Roundtable. That's 181 of the world's biggest companies have embraced these principles. The World Economic Council, who's Klaus Schwab, I think, invented the name stakeholder capitalism. The Embankment Project, that's Ernst & Young, and that's also Ernst & Young and the Rothschild family. Capital Exchange Traded Fund, funded by or founded by Paul Tudor Jones, a hedge fund billionaire. Larry Fink, not Find, sorry, BlackRock. If that isn't a who's who behind this concept, that's, I don't know what more you could ask for. Barron's, the most capitalist organization or publishing company published by the Murdochs, is all over it. And why? Because this matter way of doing business, as Gary said earlier, you do better, you make more money. And the Just Company Exchange Traded Fund, that was based a lot on the Enterprise Engagement Alliance's original 6-year stock fund. They actually contacted us and ended up doing it on their own. But they created an exchange traded fund that has systematically outperformed the Russell 1000. The EEA's 6-year study outperformed the S&P by 34.7%. It's all auditable. And ESG funds are right now outperforming the standards right now. Pardon me, the standard indices right now. And when I look down, I'm not checking my text, but my time, and Todd, you're going to be sending me that great. So again, this is getting everybody's attention. And may not yet have trickled down to folks at the very front lines yet, as the CEO's chairs are creaking, or I should say while they're vacuuming the home right now, as they realize that people truly are their biggest asset. And Gary, I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit more about this as to why, but if you think about it, without people, all of the assets that we carry on our balance sheets are meaningless. Every hotel chain, every real estate organization, every manufacturing company, GM, they all discovered that without people, everything, the tangible assets on their balance sheets are meaningless. Meanwhile, the 80% of their goodwill on their balance sheet, that intangible, is actually the only tangible. So maybe everybody's discovered, as CFO Magazine is saying, that this is really a CEO priority now, that we're spending more than 50% of our expenses on human capital, on incentives, recognition, loyalty programs, learning programs. Most of them aren't being measured, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And so CFO is urging its readers, who are the top CFOs in the United States, that they've got to be really helping HR and marketing develop better ROIs for what they're doing. So what we're seeing, and I'm setting up, all of these talk of human capital metrics and management don't mean anything unless we not only understand what it is and why it's happening, but we understand that how we turn it into something that actually is going to move the business forward. You know, I see all these posts about human capital analytics and all these webinars, and perhaps we've hosted some too, where it sounds very abstract. Like, what the heck do I do with human capital analytics? Well, really what it's about is, we'll see in a minute, coming up with a scorecard and metrics that make it much easier to run my business, to make it much easier to gauge whether I'm improving, whether my recognition program, my incentive program, my loyalty programs, my diversity programs, my training programs, are they doing anything? But the big thing that's going to drive this, the reason the CEO is going to have to focus on it, and maybe again, it's going to happen even more so because of COVID, but we'll have an opportunity to discuss that here. But the SEC, under a Republican administration, has proposed disclosure rules for public companies. Senator, the SEC chair is a big backer of this. And so this is, if Republicans and Democrats agree on something like this, one way or another, that's going to happen. The European Union now requires human capital disclosures by any company with more than 500 employees in 26 countries. Over 70% of consumers, through multiple studies, are now factor people into buying, investing, or job search decisions. 70% of men, again, especially during COVID, that may not be the only factor right now. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Gary's had some interesting things to say about that, and so has Todd. So and nearly $16 trillion in investment capital now focuses on ESG, according to numbers we're tracking, but I'm told it's much more. So I'm going to stop for a minute. We're going to have a quick little poll, if you don't mind. And maybe, Gary, you can talk a little bit more granularly while we do this poll of how you think COVID, everybody, you made a really interesting comment. People say that, everybody just desperate to have a job now. They'll do anything to avoid losing their job. They want their job, and engagement. No companies are going to worry about engagement because they figure they can just replace everybody. Somebody actually said that to me. What's your response to that? You're muted, Gary.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the response to that is that's not very logical, right? What you hear is you want to still retain your top talent, right? And you don't only want to retain your people, you want to engage them. You really want them to be inspired, excited about the market moving on. There's a lot of people feeling helplessness. And what we want to do is engage them in ways that keep their discretionary efforts high. Because I've also heard a lot of people that are home and dispersed versus they don't think they're getting the same efforts they used to when they were in the office. And so again, engagement becomes critical because it's a critical factor in discretionary efforts of your human capital, right? So
Gary and Bruce, sorry to interrupt you there, Gary, if you want to wrap that up, but the question of why has HR been so slow to embrace disclosure and validated reporting?
Let's hold that question aside. That's a great question. We could literally have the whole program dedicated to that. So, in fact, we will, whoever asked that question. We have a session actually coming up on that, tentatively scheduled, and David Ulrich, who's one of the HR gurus of the United States, if any of you know him from Michigan, is actually going to be talking about that. So that was a very great question. Anyway, I'm going to end polling. Thank you. By the way, you should all know, those of you who are responding, these are anonymous. So We're not tracking. But in any case, out of those of you who responded, which was 34, most of you believe that will force companies to pay more attention. I'm sorry. I think you should see everybody see those results, right? Okay, moving on. So let's be honest. We really have not, and that's another thing we could have a whole session on. Do most companies really deliver their promises? Do most companies sit down and strategically decide, this is what we stand for, this is our purpose, this is our culture, this is how we're going to achieve our objectives, through whom, and have a strategic and systematic plan that we're going to measure and that we're going to monitor it, and we're always going to continually improve. We'll ask how many people think companies are run that way. So before I get into the actual metrics and management, remember I said that this session, or we said that this session was going to be about managing strategically and systematically your most precious resource, people, having good metrics and good measurements down to the granular level that Todd's going to take us into even a meeting, or a virtual meeting. What is the ROI? There's a way to measure this meeting if we wanted to be that granular about it. Todd, maybe we'll do that. But again, you can only do it if you do it as part of a strategic and systematic approach that's proactive and not reactive. Formal processes always provide better results and ROI. And this is what my wife continuously reminds me, that women are always looking ahead and looking how can we plan ahead to avoid things? And not referring to me, of course. Men always wait for the you know what to hit the fan. I'll leave you to judge that. No polls on that one. So it was very interesting in 2012 that the ISO organization that has come up with standards that are followed by over 2 million businesses, 62 business process standards, and they determined that they had left the whole issue of people out of their entire process. They had not, in ISO 9001 or originally ISO 9000, in the ISO environmental standards and other standards, they didn't include the human process. And they identified that when they found in the mid-2000s that their standards weren't getting any more improvement, that the companies using them had stopped getting gains. That's against the concept of continuous improvement. So they delved into it and they realized we left out people. And they, through a very laborious process, they developed the quality management principles. And they include customer focus. And remember, customer is everybody. In the words of Peter Drucker, every business is driven to serve its customers, but employees, in a sense, are customers of a company. Your community is a customer. Your investors are customers. We're all customers, and that's one of the key elements of total quality management, internal and external customers, and bringing them together, and Todd is an expert in that. Then leadership, having a clear vision, culture, values, involvement of people, always involving the people that can change things. You'll see that in our process today. Having a process approach. We do that in manufacturing. We do that in call centers. One of the people on the EA, Barbara Porter of EY, she has managed call centers as a consultant or as a business owner or as in every which way. And she would tell you that not one organization in the world very few are run the way a call center is run in terms of metrics and continuous improvement. So it's a systematic approach to management, to continuous improvement, a factual approach to decision making, and mutually beneficial supplier relationships. So again, we're going to talk about all these metrics in a few minutes and all these different ways to measure ROI, but if they're not part of a strategic and systematic plan with a continuous feedback, they're useless. And companies have been spending billions of dollars a year on employee engagement surveys. No survey has found that employee engagement has gone up in many, many years. And in fact, they don't, because most companies don't do anything with the results. People don't respond anymore, because unless you provide a clear sense of mission and goals, emotional bonding, people are capable, and that can be customers as well as distribution partners and your employees. Unless there's a sense of fun, support, task value, and feedback, and you're addressing this, you're not going to get optimal results. And the fundamental issue for most organizations today is that organizations are still based on silos. I have seen so many companies where their learning, training, their learning programs are different from their incentive programs, from their loyalty promotions. Their internal and external marketing are all completely fragmented between different groups. When anything logical that we've learned from total quality management is you want a strategic and systematic approach, alignment across the organization, focusing on all of our stakeholders. And honestly, I think if most of us look at it, most of our different elements in our organizations are fragmented. The companies spend about $1 trillion doing all these different things, and many, many different departments don't even talk to one another. When clearly what we've learned in a call center operation, in manufacturing, logistics, quality management, research, development, having a strategic and systematic approach always yields a better result, and with a clear design framework that includes all the key tools that are relevant to your organization. And so, yeah, we're going to be getting into right now the metrics that we promised to have you. And Todd, man, pack up those cases there, or that case. You said only one. I'll hold you to that. So anyway, I'm going to get into the real meat of this in a second. But I'm going to, again, give us an opportunity, if I can get this for another quick poll here. If you can bear with me here, if make this work. And then Todd, let me ask you this, in all your years of experience, what companies, how often do you think companies are really managing their business in a strategic and systematic way?
Oh, wow. The more and more I've worked with companies with business operating systems, which is very systematic and
Excuse me, 1 second, Todd, there's a poll up there. Do you believe that most companies have strategic and systematic approach to the way they manage and engage their stakeholders? Todd, let's have your viewpoint while people vote.
Yeah, it's rare, very, very rare. How about that? There are a lot of great entrepreneurial companies that do get stuff done, but there's this element. A lot of companies are run by visionaries, and they're the idea factories, and they're the squirrels on crack with chrome acorns. And they can get stuff done, but with strategic, systematic, it makes all the difference in the world.
Gary, would you concur with Todd?
Yeah, I mean, if you say, do they have a systematic approach to manage or engage their customers or engage all their stakeholders? I think small new ventures do, because of the excitement, emotion, intellectually connecting. But the larger the companies get, the less likely they are. Isn't that interesting to have a systematic approach to manage those stakeholders? Kind of an interesting issue, isn't it? No wonder a lot of the growth in the world today is by new ventures, and that because they have all that excitement as companies get all larger and more organized. They kind of forget one of the magical things that caused them to be successful when they were starting.
Great comments. Okay, well, I'm going to show you the results here, and not surprising, I wish we could talk to the two people who said yes, because I'd love to hear that, but we're not going to have time in this format for that, or maybe we will a little bit later on. But moving on, I'm going to get off of this screen and close it out. So I'm going to now start getting really granular now, so hold on. The ISO 30414 standards provide a terrific way to organize information for your own organization. They leave out two key areas or three key areas, but they still provide terrific granular information to help you develop a scorecard. And that's all human capital analytics are. It's the same thing, and former partners have warned me never to use sports analogies, so I'll stay away from that, only to say, can you imagine a team that tries to, or an athlete who tries to perform without having any kind of metrics, without having any type of different ways of measuring? And there's not only results, they want to be measuring how well they're doing something. So are they doing the process right? And then are they actually scoring? Those are the two things. So that's as far as I'll go into, I should say, sports. So ISO published in 2019 a whole new way to publish, to report on information that potentially could be comparable, so that public companies could actually report this using formulas that are agreed upon. And the ISO folks took multiple years to do this. I think 43 countries involved, some terrific people, painstaking process, develop standards that, while you may never need to get that certification as a company, they provide a beautiful roadmap to develop a scorecard. Because essentially, if you apply a strategic and systematic approach to engagement and to your human capital management, you can potentially get a significantly bigger ROI on the 50% or more money that your company is spending on people right now, and that is going to be subject to this, I think, the chopping block in the next coming months, unless companies have a clear ROI. As we've all agreed, most companies don't. So it drives better results by aligning human capital, human activities to organizational goals. I see all this money spent on recognition programs that aren't in any way aligned with supporting what is the internal or external customer. That's the opportunity. The opportunity to create comparable data for effective decision maker. We'll share that with you. The ability to lower employment and customer risks, a major factor today, especially in mergers and acquisition analysis. Rewarding effective people management. Right now, there's no really way to measure whether these programs are working. We're going to show you that you can. And for those companies that are interested in, or that have to disclose information to national bodies, they can just create one report and share it with everybody. And then, of course, there are corporate responsibility reports that are publicly shared by more and more companies like Merck, SAP, Wegmans, that talk about how they manage people. Now, what makes standards different is that many different, there are many great standards out there, but most of them focus on outputs. Great Places to Work, J.D. Powers, American Sustainability and Standards Board, others here on this slide under development. A lot of them focus on what the outputs are. ISO, in the approach that we're going to be sharing today, is very much focused on coming up with the various metrics, not only that are outcomes, but are processes. So these are all different types of metrics that ISO recommends that companies either track for internal or external reporting purposes. So number and type of grievance filed for compliance, dispute resolutions, costs, workforce costs, and external costs. There's a whole bunch of these costs here, and of course, you'll get this slide. And getting more granularly, diversity, all the different ways you can easily manage diversity. With all of the work for the payroll systems now, it is very easy. In the HR platforms, it is not difficult for most companies, and many do measure this information already. But it's an issue and an opportunity for solution providers or professionals to help organizations get all of this information together about organizational culture, occupational health and safety, diversity, leadership development, recruitment, mobility. These are all from the standard. And these are, companies should be probably tracking all of this different information year to year, because they are going to provide a real, key, indices as to they're doing well. But probably most companies are going to want to come up with a more narrow scorecard. They're going to want to have ratios and information that's more relevant to their business. So what we would recommend, and I think most people would recommend, is that you come up with a scorecard that includes, of course, all your stakeholders, and that breaks it down per customer, per employee, per distribution chain partner, per every stakeholder. When you put it into a ratio and you use consistent mathematics, and again, wherever possible, I would recommend using the ISO mathematics, because again, it gives you the opportunity for worldwide comparability someday. But either way, you come up with something that's comparable where you can actually see, what is my revenue per customer? What's my cost per customer? What's that customer's engagement rate? What is his or her willingness to refer? What is their history with us? And what is their turnover? And you do this for each of your stakeholders. And you look at your costs. What are your total costs? Sales and marketing costs. Ratio of pay and remuneration per workforce category. Workforce diversity, leadership development. This is one company's scorecard that can fit on a page, right, where they can really see from year to year how they're going and correlate that to financial results. So and then use this to determine, what do I want to disclose to my employees? And what do I want to disclose to my customers? And what do I want to disclose within the organization to the people who need the information? So I'm going to quickly stop again for one more pause before I get into my real quick dive and then turn it over to Todd. I'm going to do one more quick poll here. I thought I had done that here, but here we go again. So let me see, did I already ask you that? It says I think I may have already asked you this, but do you believe, pardon me, I did, right?
Yes.
Sorry about that, folks. I don't want to waste a lot of time on this, but apparently it did not reload that. So bear with me. I'm going to try one more time. Close that out. Sorry about this, folks. It's not letting me, for some reason. I'm not doing it right. I'm not going to waste your time.
Yeah.
Let's move on. All right, that was a cute little trick. Anyway, so let me get into the master measurement model. This was developed by the American Productivity and Quality Center. This is a strategic and systematic approach to building an ROI-based engagement program. The IRF has this study free on its website at theirf.org. And there's a company called ROI Pro, I believe at roipro.com, that's actually kind of taken a version of this and laid over a lot of enhancements to enable companies to apply it in a practical way. In any case, it's a process for building return on investment into process design, and I'm going to take it through it real fast. You start by identifying the people critical to achieving the goal. You remember that process, the importance of involvement, always having people. There would be people selected for age groups, how long they've been with the company, maybe psychologically for whether somebody's a skeptic versus a positive person. And then one of the very first things is you set realistic goals based on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to share with you later on, and within a few minutes, a trucking company and what they were trying to accomplish. So you want to set very realistic goals. Again, you have a facilitated process with somebody trained to do it. There's actually a process called BCAT. There's a certification in that helps create alignment in groups. This whole world of engagement is filled with lots of opportunities. In any case, you can involve key stakeholders in a process to a facilitated meeting where, using a round-robin approach, you develop the whole strategy. And that starts first with, okay, what are we going to measure? And you generally want to have a mix of qualitative and quantitative. In the case of a trucking company, it might be, we want to reduce turnover. We want to increase referrals. So it could be a safety issue, but in this case, let's say it's a recruitment issue. So you want to develop 3 to 5 qualitative and quantitative measures. The qualitative is what, if done more of, will yield the desired result. And then you can prioritize it and weight it, and I'll show you how. So you'll have a mix of results measures and process measures. And then you want to assign a dollar value to that goal. What is it worth? What is it worth to the goal? What is it worth to achieve, somebody's calling me. What is it worth to the organization to achieve that goal, the financial benefits? And you want to be conservative about that. And it's sometimes cool to have someone from the accounting department at these meetings. And then you want to identify the potential obstacles and the tools needed to achieve the goal and to develop a plan. What could go wrong? You want to know what could go wrong. And then again, you need somebody to continually monitor the results and feedback and make adjustments. Remember, I showed you that element about the program, because one of the big problems with most incentive, recognition, loyalty, training, learning programs, besides lack of ROI, they don't interconnect all of the different engagement processes. Learning and communications and incentives and recognition all fit together. They're not siloed. So you want somebody in charge who's looking at this across the program. And now I'm going to be right on time. I'm going to wrap this up by giving you the quick case study. Here's this trucking company that needs to reduce turnover and increase referrals. So this task force, it got together, it got some of the old timers, got a couple of the new timers, it got some of the skeptics, it got some of the, somebody from dispatchers, and it got somebody from the accounting area. And again, I've never been in the trucking business. I used to work a little bit in the air freight business, and I've toured many a warehouse. But if any of you in the trucking business, you can tell me later on if I've embarrassed myself. But in a facilitated meeting without management, ideally, because you want these people to speak freely, the group develops what it feels are realistic goals if the company implements the right strategy. And this, they turned out to decide would be turnover, how long it takes us to replace somebody, and referrals. Obviously, you have more referrals, it reduces replacement time, and it reduces turnover. So then they decided, well, we better weight this, right? So what are the most important things? Well, we really got to reduce turnover, and referrals are really important, and replacement time is a little less important. So they came up with that, and they assigned a dollar value. What does it cost us to replace somebody or lose somebody? And they came up with really a very conservative $5,000 per person. I think one of the trucking industry would argue that it costs more than that. The replacement time being around $500 per day lost time. And then referrals, they put it $5,000. That's what it was worth. Obviously, if it cost them $5,000, a referral was worth $5,000. And they identified a strategy that involved a new route structure that enabled more time at home, and a social media strategy among truckers to share information in time slots, along with an incentive and recognition program for those people that participated. So they addressed all of the information, the emotional, and the practical to try to get them to move the needle. And their HR team was continually monitoring the program. They could tell what the level of engagement was because there were very clear measures. And what they found, wrapping up here, before I show you the actual metrics, they found that, well, the team really did use the information. And the team, excuse me, I made a mistake. The key to the key to the successful process is using everything you've learned from this process, that the HR or whoever team was managing it was continually monitoring the results. And were they using the social media thing, doing more promotion? Were they using the turnover, the referral program, using more promotion for that, reminding people of the incentive? And obviously it did find that, I'm going to say in this case, it did find positive response to the idea of being able to stay away less from home, and people were using the social media platform. So before I turn it over to Todd here, here's what a ROI report would look like. Base data, they had lost 20 people. New data, they lost 18 people. That was 2 people of improvement. Dollar unit was $5,000. Dollar change, 10,000. They weighted that 40%, since the total volume, the total savings of the entire program were $41,000. The weighted result was 16,000. The replacement time, again, using the exact same language, they lowered that by a couple of days. And you calculate that by the dollar per unit, dollar change, and then weight it, et cetera, with the referrals. So, and then they could look at qualitatively, how many people participated in the routing plan? Well, it went from 0 to 25. It'll be more telling the following year when they keep it going. And participation in social media, again, they got 50% of their folks involved. So that, Todd, I think earns me, there might be a little dispute here, but I think that earns me my crate. So, and I only have a small family of 8 people. So here to start the pot off is a beautiful Soroka cloud coming off of Lake Superior, right while Todd was out perch fishing. I just made that up. Todd, you take over. I'll advance.
I'll send you 2 pieces. Nice job. You have one thing going for you. You speak in a way that what in New York Minute would maybe kind of describe that. So my Midwestern speech patterns are going to be very different. But so yeah, this slide, interestingly, when I was in my late teens, I was on the shore of Lake Superior. It was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It was 85 degrees, sunny, and this storm came through. So I would like to see in the chat with an amen or an exclamation pointer, any way that you would like to express it. Are you guys feeling like something just happened? So I know for me, it's amen. And for me, it's deja vu, but it's deja vu all over again. That particular image I remember using 10 years ago. And one fact in life is I've learned that everything in life follows about a 10-year cycle. You have 2 incredible years, and not necessarily in this order, but 6 good years, fine years. And then there's 2 years that really threaten to rock your socks. So this presents a unique opportunity. Bruce, you mentioned Peter Drucker, one of my favorite business gurus. He shared this: the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. So if you can flip to the next slide there, Bruce, please. Where are we and where have we been? So initially, everyone had to react. We're playing not to lose. You're just fighting to create some stability in your home life, your family, business, your hair, all kinds of things. And so now it's a function of shifting to response instead of reaction. You got decisions to make, and that is, are you going to play to win? And are you going to now think about just managing stability? Or are you going to really use this as an opportunity to innovate and jump into a skunkworks mode in some situations, and out the hangar comes the blackbird? Who knows what? The next slide, Bill, Bruce. So this is what gets me really excited. Is as far as normal, I say screw normal. We have an opportunity to really use American entrepreneurial spirit and innovation, and we get to create the future. And many of the things that I'm going to share with you, we've all shared before. None of this stuff is really rocket science. I just want to encourage you and give you a little bit of hope. Some inspiration seem kind of simple in terms of how you move forward in dealing with some of the things that we're talking about. So if you'd advance the slide there, Bruce. To communicate, so shameless plug, that's my company, but where is my mindset and where am I finding the mindset of people that I'm working with, companies that are embracing a business operating system to totally create strategy, but also then a systematic way to accomplish it? You'll see that there is a summit, and it's a smaller of the two. There's something to happen. Boy, we really had something that happened, and now we get to decide whether or not we're going to pick a new summit and work our way up there. And I am just all about building business better. And so I want to encourage you that there are ways to do it. Hopefully you can take some of the things we're talking about today and actually learn to apply it. All right. So next, Bruce, back to the basics. There must be a build, right? So why do we measure? Okay, we've got the things we measure to manage it, but at its very core, we defend, we can use results measurement to justify. Certainly there's an accountability component, but I want to also share with you the big nugget, and that is continuous improvement. Who is not willing to embrace continuous improvement, Kaizen, whatever you want to call it? It's, if you measure things, you're going to be able to understand what worked and what didn't work to drive improvement that is fact-based. So next slide. Everybody knows that there's essentially 3 phases to whatever you're doing in the business world. There's design, fulfillment, and there's a measurement component. In the past, and the speed of business and everything else forces us to zip by the measurement part. And sometimes we'll try to extract some learning. I think complacency, as well as perhaps not recognizing that there are some simple ways to measure results. And obviously there's ROI methodology where it's a financial measure, but there are other ways too. And I want to encourage you to consider this. So ROI Institute and their ROI methodology, it's the gold standard throughout the globe. It's used in over 60 countries. Jack and Patty Phillips have written over 60 books. There are 4,000 plus certified ROI professionals, of which I'm one. There's a framework here, and it just adds order and takes what can seem to be an overwhelming way in which we want to measure results of anything that we invest in. In this case, we're talking about investment in human capital. And it puts it in buckets. Logical starts right at reaction, action, and moves up all the way to ROI. Next slide. So what are they? This stuff, again, you'll be getting this deck. You can pay attention to it. But so level 1, participant satisfaction and planned action. Level 2, knowledge, skills, information, application, changes and on the job, behavior, impact is critical outcomes, and of course ROI, a comparison of financial costs. Next. So this first level, reaction and satisfaction, oftentimes the thought is, wow, why would we even measure that? It is critical. We're talking about engagement. This was a definition created a while ago with the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, a forum of people that got together and said, hey, boy, how do we make this really simple? And it's positive. So who cares? Let me further ask that, answer that question if you'll advance the slide there, Bruce. We all know there's the data that's there. Next slide. Here's a study. I think that that's pretty well understood now that disengagement costs everybody, the economy, companies, et cetera, lots of money. This is a study that estimated at 350 billion. Next slide. So this is a critical thing to understand. If we want to drive ROI in terms of a financial return on investment, level one, this reaction, satisfaction, or engagement is really another way to look at this. You have to appeal to the heads and the hearts of human beings in order for these others to be accomplished successfully. So level two is this learning and understanding component. We've all been there, right? There's training and you're going in and you are not in the right headspace. You're not believing in the company, you don't trust them or whatever. Well, it impacts learning and understanding, right? So learning and understanding must take place in order to drive level three, which is behavior, application and implementation. This is behavior in the workforce, right? And without that, we can't create the business impact and we can't create the ROI. So level one, level two are really critical things to measure. Next. So how do we get started? It's a pretty simple process. If you use a methodology, and I'll share this with you, there's all kinds of information available in the public domain out there, but it's a project planner. We determine what our objectives are in all 5 levels, including those ones that seem like they're really soft measures, but they really matter. What's the measure? How are we going to collect data, timing, etc. Next. So there's a process too. Evaluation planning, data collection, data analysis, and reporting. I share this with you because there is a nice, really simple, linear way in which to do this. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy all the time, but it can be done. It can be done simply. I'd be happy to spend an hour on the phone with any of you guys and talk you through this to give you the framework and a little more detail so that you could actually get started. There's 1- and 2-day workshops, and there's actually certification that's available if you really want to push into this space. Next slide. So this is my precious. Why do we measure? Sure, an ROI is nice to know whether we got a great financial return on investment. So as it relates to the real goal that's there in asking the right questions and gaining insight, it's a function of creating a summary of results and the key findings, identifying barriers and enablers, and an action plan. In other words, if we're going to continue to do this kind of investment or others, how do we make sure that we're driving this continuous improvement that's fact-based? You ask the right questions, you tabulate the data, you go through this kind of a process, and you'll be able to make your investment bigger, better, faster, smarter. So I'm hoping next slide there. Hope I'm helping you make some sense out of what can be really overwhelming. In my experience, people embrace this whole concept of human capital investments in it and how do we measure results, etc. But it gets to be overwhelming. As this thing said, yep, I decided to throw up my hands and go right into the cocktail reception. A couple of Bloody Marys always seems to make the data make more sense. But if you'd advance there, Bruce. Just a couple of examples of measurement in action, real life. It's not that hard. It can be done. There's lots of data points and places to find some help. And so next slide. This was a serious study done in collaboration with Enterprise Engagement Alliance. This is a two-part case study where we really did measure ROI that would pass the CFO sniff test. So that's been done. It works. A lot of work to that. Next slide. You can get that from Bruce. So here's an interesting one. We've used measurement tools to determine what works and what really doesn't work with virtual and hybrid events. Look at the 10 become even more relevant. If you want that report, it's still completely relevant. Let me know. Be happy to send that to you. But as simple measurement and action, it really told us what worked, what didn't work, and dispelled many myths about virtual and hybrid meetings at that time. And actually sometimes still debated is whether or not virtual and hybrid events cannibalize live attendance. Next slide. So this is what measurement looks like if you're really going to get serious about it. 113 training and development programs that are just popped into a dashboard like this, broken up into the buckets of reaction, that's a level 1, and the bottom there, engagement, which is really a subset. In this case, it was engagement with a team, a training and development team. So that was a subset that was really important to them to understand how they're connecting with building with their participants, and then learning. And so here's another really simple use of data. We measure the results of, in this case, 113 training programs. Put that data into this, and we are able to identify trending, recognize opportunities to intervene, and also this is obviously very valuable for key stakeholders, and of course, at budgeting time when people are saying, okay, what should we budget for training and development? We can take a look, and in this case, there's total number of events, learners per event, training hours, etc. But there's real quantitative information here that's of value and of interest to key stakeholders. Next slide. So how about something really simple? Throwing a lot at you, but hopefully there's a spark that ignites here. So this is software that's really simple. It essentially allows us to put of customers, clients, or employees. Email goes out, it's one question: how satisfied are you with your career at XYZ? How satisfied are you with the services at XYZ Corp? And they select a number from 1 to 10. There's a comment box, and we are able to pull this into a dashboard like this that allows us to identify trending. If we're making some changes in the organization, how's the needle moving up or down, and allows us to intervene when necessary. So you got an employee that's really downward trending or is giving us a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, allows somebody in HR capacity to intervene. And I've seen this save employees, and I've also seen this really save client relationships where the feedback loop wasn't really working very well, and got a 6 along with some quite vivid comments in a comment box, and that allowed a office to intervene and essentially save that client relationship. Next slide.
Well,
so I covered a lot.
Well, and I think in the interest of time, I kind of want to summarize a quick thing, and then we'll throw it open to any questions. First, thanks a lot, Todd, and Gary as well. Gary, do you have any last thoughts hearing this before we throw it open to questions?
I just want to kind of highlight what Todd said, that I think is critical when he talked about the different levels. You know, think what's going on right now. We may have satisfied employees because they're at home, but they're probably not as engaged. And you really got to do, I mean, so then we say, well, let's get them learning. Let's develop our employees. A lot of companies say, let's develop our employees. Unless they're engaged, they're intellectually and inspired by the company and the values, they're not going to train well. And, you know, we throw different levels. We start at level 3 and level 4 when we realize that if we're really going to have impact on learning and other things in the engagement of the organization, we really got to start at those first levels in that. And I thought that was a good way to look at it that I hadn't thought of before. So I just kind of amen to what Todd said. It's great.
Oh, well, thank you. And just I'm also sharing with you folks, as you could, if there's any questions, please let us know. There's lots of free information on this slide. There's a whole marketplace of solution providers out there now that are part of what's called the EEX Advisors Program. So like that engagement tracker that Todd shows that his company has. There are other types of services. There are engagement companies, culture companies, companies that provide alignment services. The ROI company, whose name I probably got wrong, which isn't fair to him. So in any case, if there are any questions, please let us know.
Hey, Bruce,
Sorry?
About, did you want to answer this one about why? I know you're going to address it in a future webinar, it sounds like, but.
All right. Well, I just realized, by the way, that website, being fair to that gentleman, is roiprofit.com. That's that ROI tool. But in any case, Todd, to answer that question, I think it's a very big cultural thing. And if we have Gary, you might even want to mention it too, because we're going to have 3 more minutes, and it is a big question. The issue number 1 is that HR generally is more of a gatekeeper and more of a guard and social worker role in organizations than it is viewed as a strategic player. So HR people are hired as a compliance and as a defensive measure. So the very nature of the HR person, they don't have training in human capital management. It's not in they don't look at the business from the business standpoint. In fact, I have worked with HR people who I love personally, but they're terribly frustrating to work with in an entrepreneurial environment because they're just focusing on very compliance issues and they're not agile or nimble. So I think it's the CEO's fault for not hiring HR people who are really business oriented. And how are we going to use our people to drive our organizational results, and who has the marketing experience, internal, external marketing, who knows how to use communications, learning, incentive, recognition, loyalty programs in an integrated way, who knows about metrics and management. I don't even think the SHRM certification program even covers that. So I really do think it's the cultural positioning of HR, but there are people in HR who are going to be on our next webinar like David Ulrich, Laura Queen from 29 Bison, Amy Armitage from the Human Capital Analytics organization, and somebody from Global Reporting Institute from Brazil. They'll be talking about that very issue. So we're pretty much done here.
Hey, Bruce,
gotten some very nice comments, but we have a couple of questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
So Scott says he totally agrees with what you said, but how do we make this point to CEOs and HR people?
It's focused on the bottom line. Hey, how much money are you spending on incentive, recognition, loyalty programs, training programs? What's the ROI? It's your biggest opportunity. But if you're going to, you might just think of cutting them right now. Oh, that's the easy thing to do. Cut them. But then what's going to happen? There's a reason that you did them in the first place. So you don't want to, throw out the baby with the bathwater. You just want to raise the baby better. So the way it's really a very interesting. Companies know they spend 50 to 60% or more of their revenue, of their costs on totally intangibles. So the best way to get to them, Scott, is to basically say, we're going to help you monetize in a better way your intangibles, and you'll be able to measure it. Both from that global scorecard, the ISO approach of looking at all your metrics, not just employee though, that's where they're not, they took on enough with employees, I give them that, but you can use that same framework for customers and distribution partners, create those ratios. And so those ratios are going in the wrong direction, and you're spending all this money on training programs. That gives you a macro, indicator. And then again, when you use the methodology of the master measurement model or the ROI of engagement that Todd shared, you can get more granular. So
Bruce,
again, go ahead.
A question that's so relevant, and we have a couple minutes here left. Are there any specific metrics that would be relevant to track as companies emerge from COVID-19? Let me just add a couple of quick things. So what is it that people looking for is they're going back into the workforce, back into the office, whatever. Certainly there's it's kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're looking for safety. They're looking for security. I think also one really important thing I'm seeing is that employees want to know if what their part is in building to a bright future. If it's changed within their organization, they want to know what the future is. Are they contributing? What's their role, and are they contributing to it? There's this real important need of making an impact in their career. So that gives you these broad level category ideas. Gary and Bruce, maybe you can weigh in on that.
Well,
Yeah, I would
there is
include
actually,
trust. I would include trust in there.
Mm.
The relationship of trust between your customers, your stakeholders, and that. I think that's going to be even more important in the next year or so to measure.
I wouldn't have thought of that, Gary. The way I would look at it is, uh, what are your organization's objectives coming out of COVID? What do you expect? What are you looking for specifically? What do you want to happen? You know, some companies have to totally pivot. So what their metrics are going to be is related to the pivoting. Some have to rebuild, some have to rehire. You know, we're going to be seeing the biggest, Gary, can you imagine, you know, you and I probably, you know, have the same number of years in our lives. Who would have ever imagined it's a global reshuffling of talent and customers and distribution partners at one time? Because I don't think anyone's yet realized that everything stopped. So for the very first time, all the old norms are over. Everybody, customers are going to be changing their habits, distribution partners, suppliers, and all of it's going to be based on the trust that comes out of what happened, right?
New processes. What are those new processes that work more effectively in today's market that didn't in the past? Our old processes, we got to refine our processes to get different outcomes.
Well, and that's what this webinar was all about. There's one last question. Do HR people know they don't have this kind of expertise? Yes, and frankly, unless the way to position this, if you're going to HR people, is you basically have to position it. This is a way for them to enhance their careers. But it really depends upon the HR person. It depends upon what they're hearing. It depends on how ambitious they are. And, you know, in many organizations, HR is a very weak position, I'm sad to say. So, but if it's a serious HR executive, and you can usually see it on LinkedIn, you can appeal to their desire to be at the C-suite, because that's the big frustration of HR people. As we conclude this meeting, they'd rather be at the C-suite than where they are. So folks, thank you so much for attending. And Gary Rhoads and Todd Hanson, thank you so much. We'll send out a graphic of this, a PDF of this deck for all of you for attending. And we wish you a wonderful day and a great week. Thanks again, and good luck in this new era. Bye-bye.
Bye.